Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. So welcome to the John Schultz podcast. And as you know, this is the podcast that teaches us the myth to overnight success. Some overnights are faster than others, and some look like they are, but really aren't. We have a terrific guest today, Henry Schuck, who I've gotten to meet in person and hung out with a bit. And he's an awesome guy. Really enjoy spending time with him. I'm going to give you a little background on Henry. Henry is the CEO and founder of ZoomInfo. And Henry, just for a second, because ZoomInfo obviously may get Zoom, that word's too used lately. Give a little background on ZoomInfo as far as what ZoomInfo does.
Yeah, so today ZoomInfo is a platform for go-to-market teams. It helps people, salespeople, marketers, and recruiters find their next best customer, engage with their next best customer. It provides them analytics on who's engaging and who's in the market for their products and services right now. So if you don't know what ZoomInfo is, ask your closest B2B sales person, friend, or colleague, and they'll definitely know what ZoomInfo is. But we're arming salespeople and marketers with the information and software that they need to drive their businesses forward.
Yes, and today you got a $15 billion market cap. Obviously, over the last 12 weeks, a lot of things have changed. So I looked it up today. 3,000 employees. You were the founder of Discover.org, right? Which then acquired ZoomInfo in 2019. You were raised by a single mom who was a very hard worker, just like yourself. And we're going to talk a little bit about your past. You worked your way through college. You went to UNLV, right? 2001. Yep. And you ended up working at a SaaS company while you were there. Then you went to law school, lots of accolades, Fortune 40 under 40 in technology. And recently the 2002 Sam Blackman Award from Technology Association of Oregon, which is a major award. And thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. We're excited to have you.
Excited to be here.
Okay. So you just got a little brief introduction. We're going to go back in history. I find it fascinating to see where people started and how they sort of navigated through it all. And I guess, you had some interesting jobs when you grew up. Hotel operations administrator for MGM Grand, field director to Get Out the Vote campaign, which I could see you would be great at that. You're just so happy, a great smile. You're always positive. And then for nightclubs, I guess you did some other things. So what did those things do to shape sort of how at such an early age, starting your company, Discover.org?
Yeah. So, there are probably three things that jump out to me. I think first, when I was actually in high school, my first job was actually in middle school. I did door-to-door newspaper sales. So I sold newspaper subscriptions door to door. And I remember when I first got that job, one of the things that I got as part of the training was just this piece of paper that said, look, do not leave the door until you've had 6 no's, at least 6 no's. So let the customer tell you no 6 times before you walk away. It's a secret to success. And then they had all of these objections that the customer might tell you, and then responses to it. I have to talk to my husband or my wife before I get a newspaper subscription. I already get another newspaper. I probably won't read it. All of these different excuses, and then you had a response to it. And so for 3 years, I went up and down different streets trying to sell it's called the Glendale News Press, and just got no after no after no after no. And it turns out it was right, that if you held out for 6 no's, that the person would just buy the newspaper. It wasn't very expensive. It was like $4 a month. And if you had responses to all of those objections, that you could get to a yes. So that was an incredibly valuable learning experience as it came to when it came to really understanding how sales worked, and how objection handling was really important. And then in college, I worked for a similar company to what we founded at Discover.org. And this is like 2002. This was a SaaS company, which in 2002, Salesforce.com was founded in 1999. And that was like the first big cloud company, the first one that was really doing a SaaS-based model. And 3 years later, I was working at a company with a very similar model. And it was really like I learned how the business operated. I learned how subscription revenue worked. I learned how you sold, how you marketed your products and services. So it was a tremendous learning experience. Now, I was in college at UNLV. I thought I was going to be a hotel manager. And so I was working at the MGM Grand. And so the third kind of big job was at the MGM Grand, and then realizing that wasn't a career that I wanted for myself. And mainly because, today's job for any CEO of a large company, you're kind of on all the time. But when I was in college, my boss's boss's boss would work kind of like 15 hours a day, every single day, Saturdays, Sundays, and his family life was not great. His wife used to call in to the front desk and like talk to me for like 2 hours because she was just like bored and he wasn't there. And I was like, okay, that's not what I want in my long-term career. And so, I finished my hospitality degree. I got an accounting degree from UNLV too, and really just decided like, this is not a place that I want to build a career. And so then I went to law school, and about a year into law school, started Discover.org, which was designed to really play in a space that the company I had worked at in college wasn't playing in, but with a very similar model. And then really over time, we kind of started blending into that space as well. And 8 years after founding Discover.org, we actually went back and acquired that company that I had worked at in college, and then made a series of additional acquisitions. And
that was iProfile.
iProfile, right? Yep.
And you were in college, you're in your dorm room, right? And
yep.
What do you feel in your life pushed you to have the confidence in yourself to actually make those decisions at an early age and not think it's like it's just something you're going to do and, it's never going to happen, right? Like most people are afraid to make those moves. Like, was it something that happened when you were younger? Like what was it? Was it family or?
It's really important. I tell young people all the time when they're looking for an internship or a job to do while they're in college, that they should probably go to a small company, because when you imagine any company of any size in your head, you imagine something very sophisticated, the smartest people and lawyers and systems and processes. And when you get into a company that you imagine to be like that in your mind when you're young, and you actually get in there, you realize like, it's not really like that. It's like a group of a couple people who are running the business and paying the bills and hiring the people and running HR. And you realize like the idea you have about what it takes to run a company is far bigger and harder than it actually is. And so if you get an opportunity to go work at a smaller company and you're able to see the end-to-end operation, you get all sorts of confidence that you can do it. And so my job at iProfile was so valuable because I got to see how a company ran, and it was a small company, like 6 people. And so I got to see, how do you pay the bills? How do you hire people? How do you work with your law firm for agreements? How do you sign deals? How do you market? And then, my boss was a mere mortal, like he wasn't, like a founding father or something. He was a guy who was running a business. And I was like, okay, like I can do that. I've seen how it runs. I actually think I can do it better. I think I can invest in the business better, and I can run the plays that I would want to run better. I think when you come into a company like ZoomInfo today, it's 3,000 employees. We have interns in the business. They just still see this big machine. They come into an organized onboarding, they get a welcome packet, they talk to HR, the lawyers come in, they go to a team. It's like they're way removed from how the sausage actually gets made. And so it perpetuates this idea that businesses are really hard and really complicated and really sophisticated. And I think the benefit of working at a small company when I was younger, it just washed that all away. And so I was really clear-eyed about what it took to run a business. And so I had a lot of confidence that I could do it.
So, and what I find interesting, so you did all those jobs. What do you feel and how important is it to actually get a broad view of what you do in your life to become a CEO or over time, grow your career, right? Like you get pushed into these different parts of a company sometimes and people get afraid, like, oh my God, how am I going to learn something else? How do you think that is? And what does it matter? Does it matter to know every single thing about what's going on at your company, especially as it gets big?
Yeah. So I think like two things are important. I think one is learning how to learn and knowing that you can learn is really like maybe the most important skill, because there are all sorts of, the CEO that I have to be today is very different than the CEO I was a year ago or a year before that, or when we were not even public a year before that. And so just being confident that whatever it is that you need to go into or adapt to or evolve into, you can learn, and then learning how to learn as fast as possible is that skill is endlessly valuable. And for us today, we're going into different spaces. Like last year, we launched 5 new platforms, went into 5 new spaces of the business. Many of them I didn't understand at all. And so I had to spend a whole bunch of time figuring spaces out. And it's like little by little by little understanding sort of what the marketing ad tech space is like, what the recruiting space is like, but being really confident that the people out there understanding those spaces and working in those areas, they're no different than you are. Steve Jobs has a quote that's something like, and I'm going to mess it up, but something like, you realize at some point that the people who invented the things that you have the most respect for are no different than you.
Yep.
And once you realize that, you can get a lot of confidence in sort of learning a new skill, going into a new area, tackling new things. And so, along the way, whether it was hotel administration or when I basically accidentally ran a 40-person nightclub promotions business in Las Vegas, or working at iProfile in B2B sales. These were all different areas that I had to learn, but they weren't super complicated once you kind of like convinced yourself you could go learn them.
So here you are, right? Getting your confidence. I mean, I think what you did at an early age is you believe people were actually for you that you were working for, not against you, right?
Yes,
like
totally.
You weren't in this big machine.
Yes.
Where everyone felt like, oh my God, sort of CYA, right? Like what happens? And it's a battle as you get bigger, and we'll talk about it and how you can keep your team aligned. But here you are getting ready to, buy this company, right? You're a young guy, discover info or discover.org. And then your friend, I guess, was calling your bluff. Like, you can't do that. Like, again, like the minute you hear trying to do something good as a young person, you're getting like beat down. What gave you the confidence to move forward, and why did you? Honestly?
So, it's interesting. We founded Discover.org when I was in law school. And if you think about lawyers in general, they're the most risk-averse people on the planet. They're literally paid to identify risk and then figure out how to mitigate it. That's their jobs. Yep. And so when you're in law school, and I was at a good law school, I was at Ohio State University, my friends were getting $150,000 a year offers in their first and second year of law school for when they were done with law school. That was a really safe and great career. And I did well in law school. And so people couldn't wrap their head around the idea that I would bypass going to these fancy law firms in exchange for this like weird data company I decided to start after my first year. That was probably, I didn't hate law school, but when I think back to law school, most of my emotions around law school are wrapped up in this idea, in this feeling of people making fun of the idea. And saying like, what a dumb idea. Like, Henry's doing this stupid data thing. And, and I think I'm not sure if I had confidence, tremendous confidence. I did. I had confidence it was going to be successful because I had seen it done before. But then I also had a huge chip on my shoulder to prove that I could build something real. And I remember after I graduated law school, we moved out to the Pacific Northwest. We had like an actual office. I drove to work. I wasn't just working out of my apartment. I remember one day, maybe like 6 months post law school, driving into work, we had a dozen employees, and thinking to myself as I walked in, like, oh, like you've built a real thing here. Like you come to work, you're employing these people. This is like a real job that you've created for yourself. And we had real competitors. So you were figuring out how to compete. We were learning how to do marketing. But you kind of like, I think I got a chip on my shoulder to prove to those people that, that this was going to be a real thing. By the way, today, 3 of my friends from law school work at the company. And many more have asked to come work at the company. So it's like a good, it's a good proof point to when you start something new, there are way more naysayers than there are people who are going to support you. Because the idea of taking a risk, most people are never going to take a risk. So they would prefer that the people around them also not take risks so that they could validate their point of view that they should have never taken a risk and that their career path is the right one. And I think you just have to power through that and know most people are not going to be like trying to figure out how to help you and supporting your idea. Most people are going to try to find the reasons why your business is not going to be successful and basically circulate around that reason. And you have to be the most confident in your idea because nobody else is gonna be that supportive.
So was it more the fact that they didn't believe in you that made you confident, or that the opposite?
I think the fact that I think the fact in law school that they didn't believe that this was a positive, like an idea that was going to be successful, just gave me more motivation to prove that they were wrong.
And did you have mentors? You know, I find, especially you're younger, I mean, my mentors have guided me through everything I could possibly imagine in my life, both personally and professionally. Did you have one? Did you search for them? Or was this just you being so young and not realizing, except you wanted to prove yourself?
Yeah, I think the first kind of 8 years of the business, 7 years of the business, I didn't have any mentors. It was just kind of like, how do I prove that myself through this business? And then when we took our first institutional money, we took investment in 2014 from a firm called TA Associates. I started getting mentors around me. We built a board. I had investors who put real money behind the company, and they started serving as really valuable mentors for the future.
So I hear you said you went on blind organizational faith up until then, right?
Yes.
Like, because without mentors and people sort of, around you pushing other people to believe, how did you get as a startup out of your dorm room? We see pictures of Jeff Bezos in his office and, someone else in their garage. And I'm actually invested in early stage startups. And how do you get people to believe in something that's not there? I mean, because I always say people say you got to see it to believe it. With what you did, you have to believe it to see it. You feel like the opposite, right? How'd you do that? And how do you stay in that mindset without mentors and without a support system except yourself for so long?
So we didn't take any investment until 2014, which meant we had to sell the product kind of right out of the gates. Like to fund the business, I put $25,000 on my credit card. My co-founder put $25,000 on his credit card. That was our startup funding. And so if we didn't sell something pretty quick after we founded the business, it wasn't going to be a business anymore. So our first customer, we sold a deal 6 months after we founded the business. Our first customer was a publicly traded technology staffing and recruiting firm. And I remember like when that deal closed and the check came in the mail, there was this moment where you went, whoa, this thing that we built over 6 months just got like basically seed funding from a publicly traded big company that even though they're 2,000 people and traded on the NASDAQ, still needs this service that we built. That creates a lot of confidence. Now you can really start believing it. And then 2 years later, or was it 2 years later? 3 years after that, we sold a deal to Google. And I remember when that deal closed, and it was a large deal. And so 3 years into our history, by that point, this was a $7-8 million business, and Google closed. And I went, okay, the company that's known for data and information is one of the most respected companies in the world, is now a Discover.org ZoomInfo customer. You gained a tremendous amount of confidence. And by the way, that's how you sold it to your customers, because you went like, you used social proof. You said, look, I know we're a small company, but Google and ComSys and this company and that company are customers of ours. And then that's how you sold it to your employees too. Like, yeah, this is a small company, but Google is a customer and Microsoft is a customer. And like, you can see that these big companies still need this service, and we just have to go out and find more people like them.
How many times a month did you think it was over? Like
all the time.
Okay. And
all the
how
time.
About through today, like, how do you feel as this thing just got, because it's big, it's gigantic.
Yeah, it's like different issues, right? Like early on, you just feel like you're kind of built on this house of cards, and one thing pulled out can make the whole thing crumble. Today, as the business has grown, what you end up doing is like, there are two things that you're focused on in the business. One is, are you executing well? And are you improving? Because you can't really like get worse than you were the year before. That's a disaster. And so you're constantly putting in systems and metrics and data to make sure that you're better than you were yesterday. And so that's just execution. Are we executing well across the business? Are we bringing in the right people to help us execute well? And then second to that is, what's happening in the industry. One of the things I worry about a lot is, I found the business when I was 23. And I'm pretty sure 23-year-olds today understand where technology is going better than I do. I'm almost 40 now. And so I think a lot about like, how do I make sure I don't get behind a trend? And how do I make sure that I don't get behind the industry? And so I carve out time every year for myself and my chief strategy officer, who I went to law school with and sat 2 seats away from me and is now our chief strategy officer. We go to like conferences anonymously, where we just go to an industry conference. We take 3 days. And it's a combination of like us learning from the conference, walking the exhibit floor, learning from exhibitors, wrapping our head around like that area of the business and what direction it's going. And then time in between for us to talk about like, where are we as it relates to this industry? Are we ahead? Are we behind? Should we be ahead? Should we wait for something to materialize? And so I spend a lot of time making sure I don't get behind on a trend, and a lot of time making sure we're executing well in the business.
It's so interesting. I have a friend, he owns 30 supermarkets. He's gigantic.
Yep.
He goes every Sunday.
Yep.
Gets dressed up, goes every Sunday, walks the floors, sees what people are buying, asks questions. They don't even know who he is.
Yep.
I see him every once in a while when I got to go pick something up for like a barbecue or something. He's in there.
Yeah.
I don't think that can be replaced with
data.
It
cannot be replaced. It cannot be replaced. Here you are,
the best data company for sales, and what companies don't realize, like you die if you don't have good sales, right? I mean, I don't think everyone gives enough credit to the execution on sales, but if you don't get out there and actually feel it, you can't just read it in the tea leaves. So that's why I think your company's so great. But I also know about you, high bar Henry, like always trying to get to the next thing and make it efficient. You seem to always be focused on what's wrong. But with the most positive attitude about it, right? Like, why does that matter? Why has that been a success sort of tool for you? And has there been times where it almost drives you too nuts, where you can't even like think about it the next day anymore, right?
Totally. It is.
How does that feel?
I asked somebody one time, we were an investor. He invested in software businesses. And and he said like, man, you guys are doing so great, blah, 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 blah. And I went like, his name's Steve. Steve, I I'm not doing anything special. Like everything I'm doing feels like exactly what anybody in my position would be doing. So I don't really think there's like some secret here. And he's like, look, Henry, the thing is, you wake up every day thinking about the things in your business that are not going well. You've got this growing, successful, publicly traded business with great people. Like it's better than just about all the businesses we see. Yet you wake up every day thinking about the things in the business that are wrong and not going well and how you're going to solve those things. And that's exhausting for most people. And most people would just prefer to get to a point where they start patting themselves on the back and not thinking about the things in the business that need improvement. And that's just easier to do because waking up every day the way you do is just exhausting and tiring. This is true, right? It is. Like when you're always focused on things that are not going well, it can drain your energy. Now, the way you refill that energy, the way that I refill that energy is there are a bunch of people in the company, hundreds of people in the company, but I would say dozens that I go to who I know are doing tremendous work and are driving the business forward and are innovating and doing all the right things. And so I try to find time in my schedule to just go talk to them because I can just go get on a call with them and go, hey, tell me what you're doing. And I know that at the end of that 30 minutes, I'm going to be filled with energy and enthusiasm and optimism about the future because those people are driving the business forward in ways that I don't see every day. But when I get the time with them, I get all sorts of optimistic about the future. And they just fill me up with optimism where in my regular day-to-day, I'm looking for problems. I go to these key people to like fill my energy back up.
I think it's so not many people, and you should be proud of yourself for this, okay? And I'm proud to be your friend and knowing someone like you because it gives me energy. A founder to a CEO of a $15, $20 billion company, like I don't know many of those.
Yeah.
And it's fun when you're talking about how you were so used to doing everything on your own. It's almost like,
yes.
You're losing control as you move forward in this company getting bigger. But like, it just shows you the power of culture. And that's the other thing I want to talk to you about, because like, as an entrepreneur, it's survival. How do you wrap your head around? And listen, you're comparably recognized as one of the best places for diversity, women, culture. You're highly rated on Glassdoor. I think it's 90% approval rating. How did you get your brain around being an entrepreneur to having this thing that you do, which is like constantly looking for what's wrong? Because as an entrepreneur, you think you're going to die if you don't figure that out. Growing such a big company, but also making the culture feel compatible. How'd you do that?
Yeah, I don't know. Great answer to that. I probably haven't spent enough time thinking about exactly how we do that. I do think.
I love how honest you are. That's good. That's why you're so good. You actually say what you don't know, and then you go find out how to do it. That's probably a lesson here, everybody. There's the lesson.
I do think the lesson is being really honest about things you know and things you don't know. I think it is also about making sure that you get the right people in the right roles at your company and being comfortable knowing or identifying and being honest when you have the wrong people in the roles and acting quickly on that. I've made all sorts of bad hires, but I like to think that I've resolved them quickly. I think that's really important. It's important for your team to see that you're doing that because you're being vigilant about talent that affects them. I think, and then I'm in the weeds. And I think people appreciate the fact that I understand. I've done every job at the company. The only thing I've not done at ZoomInfo is code. But everything else, I've been a product manager, I've been head of HR, I've been head of legal, I've been CFO, I've been head of tax, I've been salesperson, marketing person, account management person, customer success person, onboarding person. I've done all of those jobs. And so I have a tremendous respect for what happens in those jobs. But then I also have a tremendous expectation for what good looks like because I've done it. And I know that when I was sitting in that seat, I know how I would have acted. I know what I would have known. I know what I would have studied. I know how I would follow up with customers and onboard new people, and how I would bring people onto the business and train them. And so I have a high expectation for all of these roles because I've done them all. With the exception of coding, I got to figure out just some weird place inside of ZoomInfo's code base to write one line of code so that I can just say I've done that too. But it's one area I haven't
Well,
done.
it's because you're right. You're a software company, and like most of Silicon Valley feels you have to be an engineer and a coder.
Yeah.
But Jobs wasn't. I mean, if you really look at all the different combinations on why anything became, you needed both, and you can't be great at, but I think it's a different mind.
Yeah, that's probably right. Yeah.
Right. So this was your role, and you're still here. What do you think people misunderstand you the most about? Like,
oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
What do they misunderstand the most? Well, I'll tell you, like, I was always really focused on running a really great business. And you can see that in the numbers. Like, we're a software business that, grows over 50% a year over year. And we're doing that profitably with 40% operating margins, or close to 40% operating margins. You don't see that often. And so I went like, look, anybody can be a founder, right? You could just found anything. And so the founder part of my identity, I valued less than the business operational part of my identity. And so I spent a lot of time making sure we were running a great business and that I was a great business operator. And that's you can feel that throughout the company. There's a lot of innovation happening, but there is also a lot of focus on making sure we're doing that in an optimized, optimal way. And so I am still pretty focused on being known as a great business operator more so than a great founder.
That's why you're still there.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no way you would be there to this level of the size business that you're running. And that's what I find so interesting about you. You stuck to what you were, and you created a culture around you that actually is getting accolades, right? And that doesn't happen much either. All right. So here you are. You went public when? In 2020?
June 2020.
2020, pre-COVID.
In the middle of COVID.
Yeah. And I'm sure that was a crazy story, how you had to go through that. But before we get there, so how did that feel? I mean, because here you are, right?
Yep.
You took money, you got a payday,
you're
still there. Like, I'm sure that felt good, but then it's sort of weird, like, oh my God, I don't control my company. And I mean, like, all the things I'm sure that went around in your brain. Then you finally get to this pinnacle moment. How does that feel?
Yeah, I think the big thing about the IPO was that it was professionally validating. And pre-IPO, I had made money.
So you felt like an imposter all the way up till 2020. Is that what you're telling me?
There's still moments where I feel like an imposter, but I especially felt like a professional imposter till the IPO. When we IPO'd, it was the first time where, like, I felt like something came on my resume that said, like, you are professionally validated. Where up to that point, I had been financially validated because I was very financially secure and we had private equity in the business, so I had taken money down. But at the point of the IPO, I felt professionally validated. And the minute that happened, I moved the goalposts. I just said, look, there's no CEO that's really respected in the public markets unless they've been there 3 years. And then as I'm getting close to 3 years, I'm just moving the goalposts again. And I'm going like, the most respected CEOs in software have built $5 billion businesses. And you're not really going to be respected until you've built a $5 billion business. And so I think, like, the whole motion along the way has been moving the goalposts. And so I'm constantly looking for places where I can move them.
And why? I'm not trying to stump you here.
No. I'm just trying,
the whole thing is, like, I guess, is that because the journey's all that matters? I mean, like, because here you are, you could have been rewarded in your brain for many times during an 8, 10, 12-year period, and you're still moving it? Is that because, at the end of the day, it's the journey and the long-term sustainability of us as being in business and having a career? Like, is that what you think it is? Or
I think it's a combination of, I believe I have more potential than what the business is today and what we've accomplished today. And I think the business has more potential than where it is and what it's accomplished today. And so, and every year you build up a new group of people and a new set of products and a new motion. And so your potential increases year over year. So like last year, we didn't have a number of these people in leadership. We didn't have a number of the products that we sell today. And so naturally that drives the potential of the business forward and your expectation for that potential forward. You're making decisions this year around the potential that you see in the business in the future. And then it becomes your obligation to reach that potential.
And that's what personal lives also do, right? That's why there's never really an end. Like,
there's no end.
The fun part of life is what you're doing, constantly growing and learning and pushing and being around the right people. And you're amazing at that. And I know you have a great family, right? You have a young daughter. And
I was going to say, one of the things people don't know, or one of the things that maybe is misunderstood, is I am pretty normal, right? Like, I have a 6-year-old daughter. I take her to kindergarten every morning. I have a beautiful and really supportive wife. We spend the weekends like walking around wherever we live and drinking coffee. And like during COVID, we would take like long drives together. And, I love a Big Mac from McDonald's, my life is very normal. Outside of when I come into this like created universe of ZoomInfo, which is actually like pretty interesting because you end up have all of these people who are supporting me and my ideas and the direction we're going. I come into here and like everybody just wants to support the direction I'm trying to lead the company. I go home and it's a much more even playing field, right? Like we're all supporting each other. And so getting some like humility when you come home, it's like, oh, we're not just here to support you. Like we're all a unit supporting each other. Is like,
I was with a hospital executive, very, prominent CEO in the healthcare industry. And he's like, I get these accolades as leading the company. It's not really me. It's like, I just wish it would be for everyone.
Totally.
He said I'm number 1 at the company, but when I go home, I'm number 5. And like, start rigging off, and his granddaughter was, used to be 4, now he's 5 because he has a granddaughter. So I just thought that was, we're all human, man, right? We all just want to succeed and help and give and be. And when I met you, that you exude that. So like, I think you're pretty normal, because you can get lost in the success that that you have, and that's usually when you fall, right? When humility, don't take it for granted. There's always more you can do, and there's always more people you can help, right?
Which is 100%.
So to finish, because I'd love people to hear. So here you are, you're going to go public and ringing the bell, being around people, and then you're stuck in COVID world. How did that go? How, and do you wish, it was different or not?
Yeah, actually, so I had to obviously like come to terms with this, but you build this business and then you start getting to a point where you're going to go public and you imagine this great moment surrounded by the people who you built the company with, ringing the bell at the NASDAQ, confetti falling on you, this really like important moment in your career. And then we turn the corner to go IPO and COVID happens and you can't, no one's traveling. The NASDAQ is closed down. No one's IPOing. We're the first IPO of the pandemic in June. And I remember calling the NASDAQ and saying, hey, listen, what if I still want to come? Like, what if I still want to show up and we'll bring like a smaller amount of people and I still want to come do it? And they were like, oh, how are we going to tell them no? Because we need to reopen the NASDAQ.
Right.
But we really can't have him come. So they just told me like, look, it's not going to be what you think it's going to be. Like, it's going to be limited staff. It's not going to be like a big party. Like your expectation is not going to be met. So I called my doctor and I went, hey, I think I want to go still to the NASDAQ and IPO. And he was like, well, let's talk about that. And I was like, look, like, is it safe? It's like, well, there are all these things you can do to make it safe. How important is it? And I told him, like, look, like, mentally, I've spent my whole career like waiting on this moment.
It's like running into the end zone. I mean,
running into the end zone. Yeah.
Right.
And he was like, well, yeah, that's an important reason to go. Ultimately didn't make any sense to go. And no one was excited about me like saying we were going to go. And so we did it remotely, which actually ended up being pretty cool, right? Because I rang the bell, so to speak, in my office, in my house during the road show, which I would have been traveling all around the country for. Instead, I did it from my office, and I was able at the end of the day to go swimming with my daughter and see my wife and not be in some random hotel room with investment bankers like somewhere in the world. Yeah. And so that was really great. And I do think now, like, it is a really special moment for people who IPO'd during the pandemic, where it is unique. Like, if you think about the history books of IPOs, there is this like 2-year period where a bunch of people did it from home, and we led the way in doing that. So I think it's just more unique and more special because it would have been just like every other one if it hadn't been that. And so, like, a little bit of reframing doesn't hurt.
I thought it was cool how everyone had the mold, right? Talk about getting through issues and pushing forward. I learned so many lessons. It was horrible, this whole thing.
Yep.
It was tragedy with all the debt and destruction, but there's a lot of silver linings, and it gave you a lesson on how you can bust through and be a stronger person, if you had no choice.
Yep.
All right, to finish. So we know you're a CEO of this great public company, which I love. You eat Big Macs. I didn't know that today. What would you want, and not a long answer, people to know your legacy for? What do you want to be remembered for as a person?
I think I want to be remembered for being a great role model. And I work really hard to be a great CEO, a great dad, a great husband. And I try to role model the right behaviors in all of those things, to have high integrity and do the right things. And so I think, I would like to be remembered as somebody who served as a really positive role model professionally and personally.
Well, I could say you serve as a good friend. So that's part of being a role model. And I haven't known you that long, but you're a really good person, Henry. And
thank you, Jonathan. The feeling is mutual.
I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, ZoomInfo, check the product out. We own, especially during these tough times, you are going to need sales more than ever.
100%.
This product 100% gives you a roadmap and a way to do that. As he learned when he was younger, 6 no's equaled yes. These are the things you need to learn, and his product will give you the roadmap and the direction to get there. Thank you so much, Henry, and look forward to seeing you soon in person when you get to New York City, or when I come out to visit you, hopefully.
Absolutely, Jonathan. Thank you for having me.
Okay.